Hello, hello, hello. This is Sean, your host of Room 9 Podcast. Episode 32 coming at you, y'all. In this episode, I sit down with a wonderful human being by the name of Angela Territo. She works for Landmark Health Systems, which is downtown Buffalo on Franklin Street. And I just randomly got a hold of her just going through people online of who I should get and try to get in contact with and try to see if they'll respond to doing, an episode of Room 9. And she responded. So here I am, about to give you this episode to listen to. In this episode, we kind of touch on a lot of things. Landmark Health Systems is very, very progressive, which is awesome to see because you feel like over here on the East Coast, we always are dragging our feet to getting things done, and over on the West Coast they're so much further ahead as far as trying new things for the healthcare system and mental health and all of that. But in this episode we talked about EMDR, which has been around, but ketamine, they do ketamine for depression there. We touch a little bit on that. We touch a little bit on psychotherapy and hallucinogenics and just the beautiful things that are coming up in there. And there was probably quite a few moments where we got off track where I felt like I was getting my own free personal one-on-one therapy session. So it was pretty awesome for me to be able to experience that. But I hope you guys enjoy this. Before I let you get to it, just a reminder to get to room9podcast.com, fill out a contact form. I say this every week and nobody's doing it, so let's do it and I'll stop saying it. Get to the support page if you feel like helping us spread this message that Room 9 is doing. Shout out to my aunt and uncle, my Uncle Jerry and Aunt Paulette Anderson. Now, for the second month in a row, have given me $100. And that's just awesome and encouraging and humbling to see people believe in this, especially family members who I have wronged in the past. And they have just seen this change in me and believe in it now. And it's awesome. It's encouraging. It's humbling. And I don't even have the words for it. It's amazing what this whole Room 9, the podcast, the coaching, the presentations, which, by the way, I have a presentation out at Horizon Village in Sanborn at their gymnasium at 6 o'clock. That is 6/18 at 6 p.m. at Horizon Village in Sanborn. If you're around, I'm almost sure anybody can stop in and check it out. Make sure you do that. And that is it. Oh, recovery coach. If you know anybody who wants a recovery coach, contact me. room9podcast@gmail.com is my email. And you let me know, because right now I can't officially offer it with Room 9, but I am working with Save the Michaels. So if you contact me, we will set you up with them and then we can start working together. So anybody you know who wants a recovery coach, and that's just basically somebody who completely is there for you in your recovery, let me know. room9podcast@gmail.com. All right, episode 32 with Angela Territo. Absolutely love sitting down with her. I could have sat down and talked with her for hours. She's an awesome woman, and I hope you guys enjoy it. All right, talk to you guys later.
Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy. That's right. How you gonna know? You're Sean Cudahy. Stop asking fucking questions. That's right. Yeah. You better believe it. Oh, you better believe it. That's right. Come on. You're Sean Cudahy. That's right. That's right. Oh, you better believe it.
Yeah, the last episode I did too, I had my window open and it was actually kind of nice. At first I was getting annoyed by it, but you could hear the birds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the birds chirping, so it was almost like we were doing it outside. All right.
Some people do podcasts outside. It's not that annoying.
No, now that I have a good program to edit it with, you can kind of get that all in the background. And so none of it's overwhelming. But I was using this free recording program and it just could not. In order to get rid of it, I had to make the voices sound robotic almost. Yeah, it was driving me nuts. But all right, well, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you answered. I was surprised actually how quickly you answered.
I usually try to answer people quickly. It's one of my pet peeves, like when people don't answer me.
You got to get back to them.
Yes.
Yeah, I particularly was happy you because I was reading all your background and your schooling and everything, and I was like, oh, this sounds right up my alley, from the psychotherapy to the mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you seem to have a very broad, eclectic, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Of,
Absolutely.
Education and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what is like your go-to? Because I've seen mindfulness, I've seen CBT, I've seen DBT.
CBT typically, but I'm kind of, like you said, all over the map, more eclectic. I just added EMDR to my little tool belt. So
do you see good results with EMDR?
Yes.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I have never participated in it, but I mean, I've read and learned a little bit about it. And most people that I've talked to say that it's really helped them with trauma and stuff.
Yes, definitely. Like, you kind of see results right away because you're emotionally raw, like right after. So I tell people to try to welcome that feeling, because that means your brain's processing all that trauma that you didn't process.
What's the science behind that?
So the science behind that, and this is what they told us in the training, is that basically what happens when you experience trauma is that it gets trapped in your neural network on the right part of your brain. And it can't access any of your coping tools. So that's why you haven't processed any of it. So the point of EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, the eye movements, bilateral stimulation, or you can use tapping. Some people aren't very good with the eye movements. Sometimes they get vertigo or it just makes them sick or something. So like tapping on their knees, or they have machines that you can hold in your hand that are like tappers. And what that allows you to do is kind of like a bridge to form in between the two lobes of your brain. And you're able to start utilizing those coping tools that you have stored in the left part of your brain to access that trauma, so you can start reprocessing it, desensitizing yourself from it. And basically, like, the point of the framework is to reframe it for yourself so that you see it in a more positive light.
Yeah, that's awesome. I tell people all the time, one of my biggest things that scared me going through, I remember I was sitting in jail at the peak of my addiction, when I was just in the darkest spot. I remember sitting in jail. One of my biggest things was like trusting my own mind, because the psyche, what I've read in my time just dabbling and reading in psychology, have had a love for psychology and philosophy at a pretty young age. Mm-hmm. And from what I've read, like, just the mind is, you can believe something with your whole heart that you want to do it, and totally not actually believe it or want to do it,
right,
but really think you do. So one of the biggest things is I've always been very skeptical of the thoughts that have come up. Like, is this really what I believe? Is this really what I mean? Mm-hmm. And trying to deal, as far as with trauma, it's crazy how powerful the mind is. Like, some people, especially when you're a child, that something can happen to you and you completely do not remember it, like not even a second of it. And that was one of the things, something that has dumbfounded me, reading some of those cases, whether it was somebody who was, molested as a child or whatever, and they don't even remember it.
Right.
Until they do something like that, and they have an experience, and then it's just like a flood of emotions, and you almost like you experiencing it all over again.
Yes.
And that is crazy. So that's why I'm very interested in the EMDR, because I've known a few people who have gone through it and have done it, and they've all said it's helped. This guy I was pretty close to in one of my 30-day rehab, he was in Iraq and like went through some shit, and he said that really was something that helped him a lot, facing his trauma.
So what's really helpful too is, like, the therapists that do EMDR have to actually experience it in the training.
So you had to, like, somebody did it with you? Okay.
So we all had to do it.
And did you see benefits in that
Yeah.
by doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually told them, like, I went and visited my therapist, and I'm like, well, we need to start EMDR. He's
Really?
like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'll have to try that one day if I can ever afford a therapist. That is something I realized because I think it's been such a stigma to have a therapist.
Yes.
Like you're weak, you're soft, and one of the biggest things I've like learned in my as I've been growing up is how much more strength and bravery and courage it takes to actually go and talk to somebody and try to figure out your own shit.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that is a huge stigma, and so I've been trying to like encourage more people to do it because I've seen just vulnerability in general is such a difficult thing to do, but yet I feel like it's the main component to authenticity.
Absolutely.
And to really changing some your own life.
I think what's really frustrating is something that you just said. I can't afford it. That is so frustrating that not everybody has access to good mental health care.
That is super frustrating. In fact, I was in a Facebook group doing some networking the other day, and somebody mentioned about rehab and not being able to afford it, and then another person said, "Oh, well, I'm from the UK and it's all free for all of us."
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, America's got to put dollar signs on everything. And it's extremely frustrating. I know people who are in rehab and their health insurance is telling them you don't need this any longer.
Right.
And that is the most dumbfounding thing to me. That you have people who have no idea who you are as an individual human being saying you don't need treatment anymore.
Right. Yeah. They just kick you out. And it's based on notes that your therapist and rehab is writing, and, might not be all the correct information, and it's just based on protocols. And they go to meetings and say, well, this is what it's going to be now, and we're going to kick people out after a certain amount of time.
It is. It's so frustrating. It is so. I understand the dangers of socialism, but two things that I feel should be completely free is healthcare and education. I don't understand why those things are not free for every single human being in this country.
I don't know. It holds a lot of people back.
It does, absolutely. I mean, I even think about people who are coming out with $50,000 in debt in school that, you're not going to even want to take any entrepreneur risks and start a new business. All you're worried about is paying off a damn loan.
Right.
And it's insane that we do not provide free education for people. I don't understand it. And healthcare.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's crazy. My cousin he's gone pretty much all bankrupt. I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember what the hell he had. A great cousin I am. But he was in and out of Buff General, for months and months and months, and lost his job. And I mean, even his company was like, we can't keep giving you this health insurance anymore. You've been gone too long.
Right.
And he had to file bankruptcy. And it's such a terrible, messed up thing that you don't even take care of your own people.
Right.
That's crazy.
It's really sad.
So, all right, we're getting way off topic.
Tangents.
I tend to do that quite often.
I love tangents.
Oh, yeah, that's the way to go. That's the basis of this podcast, really, is I just have always kept it a casual conversation. And that's some of the biggest compliments I had. People were like, oh, I feel like I was just having coffee with you guys in the room. And I was like, well, I'm going to keep that vibe going.
Right.
To not have any specific. I just don't want it to, I hate it to sound like an interview.
Yeah, no, I think some of the podcasts that I listen to, mostly, like the ones that I really enjoy, are usually just conversational. And you're in the corner of the room kind of listening to them.
All right. So EMDR, CBT was one of my favorites of learning about in rehab and all that. I mean, what are your thoughts on it? How do you approach it when you are sitting down with a client?
I don't know. Approach it is it just kind of comes to you. It's not really like when you're a therapist, you're kind of just sitting here trying to be in the moment with a person, and like your training is in the background, but you're trying to be a person as well. And I think that's most effective is when you're with a person and you've got your training, but you're also like your personality's there. And I think that's really important. Yes, being authentic.
Yeah, and obviously that makes your client comfortable and keeps them from, shutting down. Because I definitely see that most people tend to obviously do not want to open up and do not want to talk about the crap in our lives, because who the hell really wants to do that? And one of them, I think, obviously you have to go through that in order to, work and fix things in your own individuality.
Right.
So to have that comfortable, authentic, person in the room with you, I think is obviously probably number one thing. I think Carl Rogers was one of the biggest, proponents of that,
Yes.
as far as just becoming authentic with your client.
Yep, that's total basis behind his theory. Yeah, it's one of proponents of that. Yes.
Yeah, he was an awesome guy. Who would be your favorite throughout the psychotherapy history?
I don't even know if I really remember too many, to be honest with you. I think I always used to laugh when I'd see like Freudian stuff, and I never really kind of stuck with that. I was never really the type of person to like take that history. It's interesting, but I was really interested more in like abnormal psychology. Like that really interested me. And then actually like my first internship in college, I worked with people with like schizophrenia, and we actually went to their homes, which was really interesting to see how people live. And that illness is really interesting. Some of the smartest people you'll ever meet.
I know, yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, Carl Jung was always fascinated with schizophrenia. And I remember he talked about that a lot, at least from what I've read of his and understand of his.
Right.
He did. He always said there's something that is fascinating about people with schizophrenia, and how intelligent they are.
It's almost like they're in a different dimension. When I worked on the psych unit at ECMC, I used to love like our conversations that I would have with some of the clients that would come on the floor. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's so, as much as we understand things, we don't understand anything.
No.
When it comes to the human brain. And yeah, schizophrenia is definitely one of them. That is for sure. What is your experience with addicts? Do you have a lot of addicts that come in here? I guess I hate that term. We're not supposed to use that anymore. People with substance use disorder?
Yeah, I mean, pretty good amount of people do come in here with substance use disorder. I try to focus on like the mental health portion of it though. It's really helpful to have that background. That was my first job in the field, was chemical dependency.
Okay.
And I really was not interested in working with people with chemical dependency. There's such a stigma. Even worse than having like a mental health issue. If you have like a substance use issue, there's such a stigma. When I finally got in the field, I really enjoyed working with people with substance use issues. So I'm really happy that I have that experience, and also like the experience working at ECMC on the inpatient floor. It just makes it helpful working with people like in a private setting to have that eclectic type experience.
So the people that you're working with in recovery, do they get recommended, or is it just kind of...
To me?
Yeah. Do people get sent from a rehab or outpatient or somewhere?
I get a lot of referrals from like Psychology Today, and then also like local clinicians will refer people to me as well. Okay. And within the practice, the psychiatrist that I work with is also an addiction medicine specialist. Okay. So we do like buprenorphine here. We have a clinic for that.
So you prescribe it. And I've seen you guys do medical marijuana too?
We have medical marijuana, and we just got ketamine.
Really?
Just ketamine, yes, for treatment-resistant depression.
Awesome. What are the results you've seen with that? Because I know some people are probably
that's
more
a really
so
good
against
question.
that than the marijuana.
I know that we started it, but I don't actually know like what happened with the particular patient that we started it with. So I'll have to find out about that. That doesn't really help right now, but...
No, that's interesting, because I know I've heard there's so many... How do I always end up going to this topic? Probably because I'm a huge proponent of psychotherapy with hallucinogenics. And I just have seen the wonders it can do and have read it. I know there's such a resistance, but I feel like there's finally like a push where it cannot be shoved away or hidden anymore. The beauty of the results of just having a beautiful session where you are, whether it's LSD, I've seen mushrooms, MDMA. I know there's that group MAPS that does great work with MDMA and PTSD. And there's just so many incredible, beautiful things that I have read and seen. And even in my own individuality, when I have taken it alone, and whether it was LSD or mushrooms, and just the beauty that I've seen in myself and been able to work on things and change things. And I remember when I was at my 30 day, I remember talking to this kid and just kind of, because like I said, I've always had this psychology mind, and when I'm talking with somebody, like I just want to, try to figure them out and listen to them and get to know them. And I mean, it took me like 45 minutes to get him to bring up his dad. So I knew, like, all right, there's something wrong. Obviously, there's something there with his father. And what is it? And I just remember thinking, I was like, man, with like LSD, like all those walls that you want to protect yourself and you want to hide things and beat around the bush and not have to like say directly are just gone.
Right.
And I think Timothy Leary said it. You can do 10 minutes, a psychotherapy session, 10 minutes, as opposed to 10 years, somebody who isn't taking, a substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I just see this big wave, and I'm very excited for it. As
Yes.
long as, I mean, obviously now I don't want to go around and putting it in the water system and have everybody tripping balls all day, because obviously there are some dangers that can happen. But
Right.
there's so much beauty with it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm very excited to see what the next decade brings with that.
So I'm excited to be a part of this practice in particular, just because the doctor is so open to stuff like that. So if that ever was an opportunity for me to like train and use psychedelics in the practice, I think he would definitely be totally open to it.
Yeah, it seems very, very, I mean, for using ketamine, you're definitely ahead of the wave on the eastern side of this country for sure. 'Cause
Yeah.
I have not even heard. I mean, I've heard that's coming around, but I've not heard any practices using it.
So it's a drug called S-ketamine. So it's a little bit of a different molecule, and it was recently approved by the FDA. It's a nasal spray.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's pretty fast delivery system, and you have to stay here for about 2 hours. We have like one of the rooms, we have like couches where you can lay down, and
Okay.
you're not allowed to drive home afterwards. You have
Naturally.
to be monitored, your blood pressure, I think every half hour or something like that. Just make sure it doesn't go over a certain amount.
So you've only had one person?
I think we've had more
a
than
couple.
one. I'm so busy. We're all so busy that we don't get a chance to like sit down and talk
And talk about
necessarily. So yeah, sometimes it's just like in passing really quick.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really would like to read more up on that because yeah, I've not heard anybody doing that. It kind of like gets me pumped up around here.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And so they have to wait here 2 hours, and it's mainly used for depression?
Yes, depression. That's what it's approved for. This
Okay.
particular drug is approved for treatment-resistant depression.
Like how often, how long, how big of a dose do people usually on average?
So it's, I think, once a week. It might be a couple times a week initially. And then they move down like to a maintenance phase like once a week. And it's kind of like tapered off from there.
Okay.
I wish I would have known that we were going to talk about this. I
It
could
just happens.
definitely give you like better an idea of what that is.
Yeah, that's what happens here on the Room 9 podcast.
Okay.
We just go all over the board. Because that was something I needed, was something different, because I can't just, I appreciate the 12 steps and AA and NA, and I can go to meetings and I can pull something good out of it every time I'm at one and learn something. But I can't do like even two a week sometimes is overblast for me. Like I
Okay.
need something different.
Right.
And there's not enough stuff like smart recovery. There really is not enough out there, I don't feel, for people who don't connect with AA and NA.
Well, and they really push like 90 and 90 too. And if you don't connect with that, that's really tough.
Yeah, there's no way in hell I was doing that.
Yeah.
I went to 3 meetings in 2 days once, and I was like, I'm done.
Wow.
I'm done. I can't do anymore. It almost, I always joke around, this is going to make me relapse if I go to any more meetings.
But that's true.
Yeah, no, it very much well is. And I think also you have to go around because there's awesome meetings and there's crappy meetings. I mean, as much as they don't like this comparison, it really is like church. There's awesome people, there's awesome Christians out there that have awesome churches, and then there's other ones that are just can't even spend 2 minutes in and are
Okay.
very culty.
Yes.
And I just know I needed, one of the biggest things I realized going into rehab, my first thought is, how do people with like 10, 15 years clean relapse? What is that? That happens? And one of the biggest things I've started seeing that was repeated from these people who were, going through relapses after relapse was they just kind of got overconfident and they got very cocky
Okay.
and thought they were good. I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to work on my recovery. It's been 10 years. I'm fine.
Okay.
And then the next thing, they wake up and a 2-week binge sleeping in a trap house. I was like, what is that? And that's what I found. And when I came up with a quote for myself very early on in rehab, like, I know I got this as long as I know I don't got this.
I saw that. I really liked that.
Yeah, and that's something that's what I say that to myself every day, because, I mean, out of everybody in this world at this podcast, and what Room 9 is, who it's helping is me, number one, because I have to do work on it every day, and that reminds me of where I've come from.
Right.
And it constantly keeps my recovery. And I think there needs to be more stuff out there for people who want to look into hallucinogenics or ketamine therapy or whatever it is, that medical marijuana, I know that's shunned upon still, very much so.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because people I think this is in every case of life, is people get a belief that worked for them and they just stick to it and act like that's the medicine for everybody else. And that is one of my biggest frustrating things. Is like, just because that worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. If that was the case, we wouldn't have addiction.
Right.
And it's one of my, I'd love to push that out there. And I've had topics on, I actually told my buddy the other day, I need to do an episode on the 12 steps because I haven't touched it.
Okay.
Out of 30, this will be episode 32. I'm doing with you now.
Okay.
And I have not really touched it. I kind of, first 2 episodes I did them with my roommate, and he was really into it, or really is into AA, and we probably talked about it a little bit more, but other than that, I have not, since he kind of stopped doing this with me. Okay. I have not done any more of it. So I was like, all right, I gotta actually put some in there if I'm gonna be, gonna preach that I'm balanced and fair about, everybody trying a different way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's helpful too for just people in general. I think the 12 steps, getting to know that. A lot of those things is helpful. Some of the principles, especially like making amends and resentments, and definitely helpful for people.
Yeah, and people even without addiction. That was one of my coolest things about this, is it's centered around recovery, centered around addiction and substance use. But I mean, I can apply anything that I love, that as far as helping your own individuality and growing as an individual, you can use. Right. Because to me, that was always the main issue with addiction, is not really the addiction itself. Why are you using over and over again? What are you running? What are you trying to escape? What is it? Even if it's just, what's the underlying issue? What's the root? And I think it's Dr. Gabor Mate says, and that's not why the addiction, why the pain. Okay. And he has this huge place in Vancouver, and he's done just years and years of work with the inner city of Vancouver and addicts, and it's just, he always said, it's just so much pain out there for people, and that's why I can talk about mindfulness and everything else. And I know that's something you also had on your website. Yes. Mindfulness. Do you go more towards like meditation? Do you go towards just mindfulness in general, just being in the present moment when you're talking with people? It really depends on the person. So some people really gravitate towards like meditation, or some people like really can't do that and they get really frustrated by that. I think that's a conversation that I have with people a lot. Like, I can't meditate. Okay, well, maybe we can do some mindfulness, and that might mean like crocheting and listening to a podcast. You're still being mindful. Maybe that doesn't seem like it, but you're not thinking about all the other things spinning around in your head. Well, that's it. I mean, that's what it is. Just being in the present moment, no matter what you're doing. You could be washing dishes. Right. And be mindful, just every step of the way. It's a very beautiful tool. And the more you pay attention to it, the more you realize just that our monkey brains are everywhere. Yes. Oh my God. They are everywhere. And it is crazy how chaotic it gets up there with the 2 different voices you have going on, the voice that says something and then the voice that critiques it. Right. And it's just very trippy and weird what is actually happening. And to be able to start calming that is just such a beautiful tool that I can't believe it's taken so long to even take off over here. Oh, you mean like in the States? In the Western, yeah, just in Western culture. Okay. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. That's true. Yeah, and it's just taken so long to start. Because I probably got into it, probably 10 years ago. Probably in my early 20s, believe it or not, before my addiction, which is hysterical to think about. But I remember reading Alan Watts. I think he's one of my favorite people. Who Carl Jung did a great job of it too, bringing Eastern and Western thought together. And it just always excited me to think about the whole quieting the mind, and meditation can be frustrating. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. And I've been at least an inconsistent meditator for probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And it's just still, it's like, oh, I'm going to strangle somebody. Because when you
Right.
first start off, you don't, like you said, you don't realize how crazy your brain is and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, your thoughts are. And you actually think you're meditating until you're doing it for a couple of weeks and you realize you almost felt like you got worse at it first. I remember questioning it. Did I get worse at meditating somehow by meditating more? And as I've kind of quieted my mind, it's like, oh, all right. I wasn't even meditating because you're so used to this racket going on.
Right.
You don't even notice it. So it takes a while to even realize that you have the racket going on.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful thing. I think that needs to be, taught more. So I'm excited that you use that with a lot of your clients.
Yeah, I use that. A lot of coping tools, and I think it's really important to remember, like you mentioning, like what works for you. What works for you might not always work for you. So having the ability to maybe go to a therapist or someone that's supportive of you and, you know, kind of talking about, okay, well, this isn't really working for me anymore, and being open to trying something different because it's not always going to work for you.
No, we definitely change as individuals.
Right.
That is for sure. Where did you go to school?
Madai.
So you graduated from Madai?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you have your master's?
My master's in clinical mental health counseling, I think is what they're calling it now.
Yeah, that's the language thing. It drives me nuts sometimes. Somebody asked me about that the other day.
It's just a bunch of words mashed together. It doesn't really mean anything.
Even in recovery, it's like, well, we're going to use substance use. We don't want to use addict anymore. And we don't want to have any. And I understand it. To me, I always laugh. Like my girlfriend would be like, if you weren't a junkie, you know, we joke around about it.
Right.
You know, not that I would go around calling people that I'm working with that, but to me, I've always been like, it's just words. Come on, let's not get into that. So I understand it, but it's hard to keep up with. Mm-hmm. How they're changing everything up all the time.
Oh yeah, it is very hard to keep up with, for sure.
I don't even know how they keep people informed of how quickly they're changing it.
I think you just screw up and someone corrects you and
Yeah,
you're like,
pretty
oh,
much.
okay. Thanks. I'll do that next time.
Yeah, it's nuts. It was something I'm like, wow, we need to settle down a little bit. But I think that's a whole culture movement too that's happening with
It's
words and
hard to be
language.
vulnerable then. Like, you know, going back to that, like if you're so worried about the words that you're using, then I'm just focusing on that. And
then
not
it's hard to be authentic.
authentic. I'm not able to be vulnerable with you. And I'm just up in my head making sure that I'm using the right words.
Yeah, it's very difficult to be open and vulnerable when you're, if anything, whether you're thinking about, like you said earlier, your training or your education. All right, I have to go do this. And
Yeah.
people read through it like, it's so easy to see, all right, she's just being mechanical or he's just being mechanical. And
I
that could
don't
be a
want
quick
anybody
turnoff.
to think that I'm ever being mechanical.
No, I imagine not. Especially when your job is to get people to open up and be vulnerable.
I think initially clinicians too, and then also like when you learn new techniques, you're very mechanical until you kind of adopt your own way of talking to people. So that's kind of goes with the learning process, I think, at least for me. But then you're just able to be yourself. And I think that's what's most important when you're with a therapist is like, you've got to pick the person that most aligns with yourself.
And that goes, I guess, with everyday conversation. When you feel comfortable with somebody, you're going to open up more to them and talk to them about things.
Right.
And that's what I guess we all want, essentially. I'm sure you've seen the Brene Brown TED Talk vulnerability thing. And
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
that was another one. I always joke around, but it kind of seriously was the cause of my divorce originally.
Really?
About 7 years ago when that first came out, because I was married. My daughter was just born. I had a son that was 6 at the time. And I remember watching that and I was like, maybe that's something I need to start doing more of. And I remember just really practicing becoming like open and talking about my feelings. And then, so my wife at the time, she's stereotypical man, work, don't talk about drinking beer, watching sports, playing sports, tough guy, only show sarcasm and anger, that's it. Just that stereotypical man. And then all of a sudden, now I'm going to cry in front of her and talk about my feelings. And she was like, I remember she was just like, I did not sign up for this.
Really?
She did not want it at all. And that was, I always joke around, but it kind of essentially was the cause of my divorce, which was pretty hysterical.
It's funny, but it's probably a good thing in the long run, right? I'm sure you don't want to be with someone who doesn't accept you as you grow.
No, and doesn't want to accept the real me, obviously. Yeah. No, it was definitely, obviously not at the time, but definitely was a blessing.
Right. Well, now that you look back at it, I'm
Mhm.
sure. But
Oh, yeah.
no, not at the time. I'm sure it turned your life around.
It did. I mean, you can say that for really, that's one of the biggest things I've tried to share with people on my journey is even my addiction. I wrote a blog called My Paradoxical Addiction, and I talked about how, as much as I would never want to go through what I've been through again, through jail, through the darkest depths of my mind and everything else, as much as I don't ever want to do that or wish it upon anybody, it was making me the awesome human being I'm becoming today.
Right.
And it's made me learn, it's made me develop, most importantly, self-compassion and love and forgiveness for myself. Which was the number one thing that I needed in my life, because so many people around me that believed in me, that knew I can do awesome things and change a lot of lives. But they were always just like, even my girlfriend, she's like, if you don't believe that, there's nothing I can do for you. Like, I can't do anything else if you don't believe that for yourself. So that was one of the biggest things that I have pulled out of my addiction was self-compassion and love and developing a confidence. It's okay to screw up. Learn from it and move forward and keep pressing on. And it's just so crazy how tragedy can actually do that. And it's almost like I remember saying at the end of my blog, it's almost like you can take this pointless, meaningless, at least something that seemed pointless and meaningless and painful, and give it meaning by learning from it and moving on. And I mean, that's like the number one thing we all want is meaning and connection in this world. And that's something I've just been trying to push forward as I move forward to everybody I come in contact with.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Thinking about like going back to the history, it seems like you really enjoy the history of like psychology and everything. Viktor Frankl, who's very one of the ones that I maybe gravitated towards, me not being a huge history buff, but he's one of them, like finding meaning in your tragedy. And that's something that I talk about a lot, I think, with people. And I've talked about my mom recently with that. I noticed she feels super guilty about a lot of things, like with me growing up. And I'm like, Mom, like that made me the person I am today. Like I'm a therapist because of all of that today. Then there's no way that I could be the person that I am without that. So I'm sorry that you feel guilty about it, but I don't. And please don't beat yourself up about it anymore, because it's helped me. As painful as it was, it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, and it's so awesome and powerful to be able to say that about something shitty that's happened to you in your past.
Yeah.
And I've actually, it's funny because I've had that conversation with my mom, because my brother and sister died when I was 15.
Oh, wow.
And I have a little sister, but my older sister, my older brother died. I was 15, and my sister, what is she? I think 6 years younger than me.
Okay.
So I always tell people I had two different parents growing up. I had pre and then, the prior, because they were completely different. My mom became pretty soft.
Okay.
after I knew I could start getting away with a lot more. But I always told her, and she always said, I feel guilty about that. And I was like, you can't. I mean, you just can't, because I always said those were the parents my sister and I, we needed. We didn't need a strict mother that would have, at least I know for me at 15, that would have pushed me away, and because I was looking for any reason to shut down and not talk. And the stricter she would have been, the more I would have done that. And I've always shared that with her. And it's just, you're right, these are experiences. If we want them to have meaning, I think it's super important just to grow from them.
Definitely.
And learn from them. And even if it takes 10, 15 years to learn something from them,
that's fine.
You still give it meaning. Yeah.
Find the meaning, and if it takes you 10 to 15 years, that's fine too.
Because I went through this dark, nihilistic, life is pointless and meaningless, and what is the point of doing anything? Basically fatalism at its finest. And I was like, what is the point? And then I think I was reading, again, what little I can understand of him, a Nietzsche book. The Will to Power or something, it might have been, but that doesn't really matter. But I was reading it, and he talked about it like being meaningless and pointless, but that's what makes it awesome, because now you can takes all the pressure off. Essentially, that's what he said. Takes all the pressure off, and you can give it the meaning you want to give it.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was one of the coolest things I read, and I almost I snapped out of this dark depression thing. I was like, yeah, that's right, I can do whatever the hell I want.
He validated it for you at some point, it sounds like.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Yeah, and I thought that was all right, cool. I grew up in a strict Christian home. Okay. And I, grew up thinking, just believing in the Bible for, at least probably first 10 years of my life, 13 years of my life. And I remember starting to get this mind of questioning things. This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. And I was shut down very quickly in my household when I would start questioning it.
Yeah.
So I went on this, like, basically the thing you grow up in, you end up hating the most almost. You know, when it's gross. So I was like, just totally, I would talk trash to people, try to get people wound up, including my mom and sister. And this is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, now you learn to kind of let people go. But it was one thing I was just like, oh, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. But there's so much now that I can sit down and like take from the Bible.
Sure.
That is, you know, that is awesome. You know, or any theology in itself. There's so many good things.
Yeah, definitely. As long as you don't take it for like exactly what it
Realism.
is. Yeah. Maybe some metaphors in here and there.
I do. It's funny. I recently had a guy that I went to the church that I grew up in, and he wanted to meet for coffee, and he wanted me to do something for the website for the company he works at. But I was like, I did a drag and drop website. I have no idea how to code or do anything with websites. But we ended up talking, and then he sent me a message, and he wants to like go through this book with me about why Christianity's the real thing. And I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry. I was like, you know, I was trying to figure out how to respectfully say it. I'm like, I can't. I don't have the time.
Sure.
And it's just it's so funny how the past, how you grow up and hate it almost the most. Did you grow up in any kind of specific theology?
I was baptized Catholic, and then I think my mom took us to a Presbyterian church, but I remember questioning a lot. And then kind of, not my mom shutting me down, but them shutting me down and like
Quickly.
Yeah, like Sunday school and stuff, because I'm just a very curious person in general and ask a lot of questions, which can be annoying for some people, I guess. But I guess I annoyed them when I started asking a bunch of questions and they couldn't answer me.
Yeah, that is one thing I made sure never to do with my son, because he's just like me in that area. Like, he just wants to know why. Why does this work this way? Why does this happen this way? This doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't this make any sense? How can you make sense of it? And that's just how, and I've always, if I didn't know an answer growing up to him, I never once I made sure I would never be like, because I said so, because of this, because, you know, make up, because God did this, or it's like, I was like, Bubba, I don't know. We have to look that up.
Okay.
You know, let's go do some research on it.
Yeah.
And that was something I just made sure I would not do with my kids. Is I don't care if you want to believe in Christianity or whatever, any kind of religion, that's fine. But don't ever stop asking questions, because that's so important.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it is super important. And we got way off of addiction and recovery.
Oops. I keep doing that. It's my life.
That is a habit of mine as well. Especially, I remember when I was texting you, I was like, I have a feeling we're just going to rant about things pretty much.
Yeah, probably. That's okay.
Which is another, you know, again, I always find a way to swing it back and relate it to recovery some form, which really isn't difficult to do, because anything you're doing to improve yourself, as I said earlier, really helps your recovery.
Right.
That's why I can just kind of basically talk about whatever the hell I want, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important. And I think I mentioned before that, like, you know, when I was a substance abuse counselor, like, I never really tried to focus so much on that. I mean, obviously that's what you're here for, and we need to talk about that, but that's in the periphery. We need to talk about everything else that's going on. And I think it's frustrating for people when you start like focusing that like in the center. As if that is, you know, their identity. Yeah, that's not your identity. We need to focus on everything else that's going on.
Yep, that is definitely important, because we always feel like the past defines exactly who we are.
But we can find meaning in it, right?
And then, it doesn't, one mistake doesn't define who you are as a whole human being or an individual, and it's something that we carry our mistakes around sometimes with us. Like, we have to, you know, keep it and hold on to it, and this is me.
Right.
My heroin addiction that's me. That's it. And that's one thing I think why they're trying to change a lot of language. Like, you know, you're not just an addict, you're also this and that and, you know, everything else. And I think that's probably why the number one biggest reason why they are constantly changing words up on how we talk.
Yeah, it's definitely for the better. I think definitely for the better, but at the same time, it's frustrating. I think for some people,
it is. Yeah, well, to keep up with it is very very difficult. That is for sure. Yeah.
Rolling my eyes. I'm the queen of that.
Oh, that's great. I think it might have been this morning I rolled my eyes. Like, she's like, did you just roll your eyes at me? I was like, no. She's like, you did. You just rolled your eyes at me. Which I don't ever do that. I don't even know where it came from. I think I was cranky and tired.
Oh, okay.
I was like, why did I roll my eyes? I have no idea. your kind of final advice, I'd like to kind of just throw this random, vague question out there to people, which I actually probably haven't done for a couple episodes. So just for anybody, we don't even have to be somebody who's in recovery, just somebody who is, struggling with mental health, struggling with, getting their lives back on track and, finding some kind of enjoyment in life. What are your, some of your suggestions on how to go about doing it in the best way possible, or finding a path that works for you?
I mean, I think it's just do your best to be open. And I think that's really important, is do your best to be an open person and be open to anything, really, because if you're open, you're able to gain all these different perspectives, and that's what's really important. Like, you can cherry pick the different things that you want if you're able to be open to them. That's why I love this job, because I talk with so many different people, and people think that therapists, like, they're helping with people all day. You guys are helping me too. Like, I learned so many different things from everybody. So the ability to be open is kind of important when you're a therapist, but also, like, when you're a person out in the world and talking to people, just try to be open so you can cherry pick those things and apply them to you as you need them. Throw them away when you don't need them anymore. Maybe pick them back up if you do need them in the future, but just be open and, like, don't stick to one coping tool. Like, okay, exercise is my coping tool, let's say. That might not work for you all the time. Maybe, let's say you develop something with anxiety or, like, panic disorder in the future, and, like, exercise could exacerbate that, and it makes people really anxious to know, I can't exercise, that's my coping tool. So now you don't have any coping tools. So just being open to having, I think, a bunch of different coping tools, and throwing them away if you don't need them anymore, and picking them back up later when you're ready.
Perfect. I think that is probably the number one thing to almost anything in life, is being open and vulnerable,
honest,
and staying away from self-pity. Ugh. That I found was my biggest thing forever. Oh my gosh, poor me is something I lived in for way too long in my life. Oh my gosh, like the world owed me something. Like, I'm the only one who went through shit and lost a brother and sister.
Right.
I did. I walked around with this chip on my shoulder for so effing long. It was ridiculous. So thank God I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
But it just kept me from doing so much. From any creative idea I'd come up with and start, and it became difficult where I had to work hard at it. Never mind. It was so crazy. Like, I expected to get rich quick kind of thing, not that I plan on getting rich through doing what I'm doing, but, I guess it's just kind of a figure of speech. But just, I didn't want to have to work hard, essentially, to do something. And it was just ridiculous. Like, you owe me, universe.
So I've been through so much.
Yes, I'm the only one who's had siblings die.
What did they pass from?
A car accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Thanksgiving of 99.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it was funny because when that first happened, I was like I don't even think I cried. It was one of those complete shutdowns. Oh, all right, I'm going to go play video games.
Okay.
Kind of, like, it was stuff down there deep.
Really? Yeah, it sounds like it.
It really was. I remember when I first started dealing with it, I would say probably 10 years after, probably in my mid-20s. I just remember I wouldn't even call it crying, I'd call it weeping for like 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Not obviously every second of the day, but like just randomly weeping, and that gut-wrenching snot coming out, going through boxes of tissues, kind of weeping.
The ugly crying.
Yeah, the ugly crying. I remember, actually, I think it was the first time I took mushrooms with my good friend. I remember we were laughing like that. And I remember, like, thinking, oh, that's the same, that feeling afterwards anyway, is the same exact feeling you get after, like, weeping deeply. Just this lightness. It's for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. That's amazing that you've mentioned that, though. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just, but you feel lighter. You feel so much better after you do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, even now I know, like, that's when I realized I got to teach myself to cry. And that's when I really started to dig into my past and my brother and sister. And it was crazy. But now I have to keep myself from crying too much.
You can do that too.
You can also do that. So I'm like, all right. But there's times I know when I start getting angry over something, like stupid, it's like, okay, I must have to cry. And then usually when I think about the last time I cried, it's been a while.
Okay.
I'm like, all right, I got to go do this. And so it doesn't take long for me to get it. And it's just such a beautiful release. It's the same exact feeling. You feel lighter, you feel weightless. And it's like something was lifted off of your shoulders. Exact same feeling as laughing, that deep laughing.
I never thought of it that way, but that's a really good way to put it. Yeah. I wonder if you get the same like chemical release in your brain.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would love to see that. I should should go get the EEG scans.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, do one next time I'm crying and see.
That would be interesting.
But thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
Your puppy, I was wondering if I thought maybe we'd have more racket from her, but she just laid over there sleeping.
That's why I got her. They're like, she's super mellow. I'm like, she's perfect for me then.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm kind of like a crazy cat lady, so I love animals
Really?
though.
Yeah.
But cats, they just kind of sleep all day.
Yeah, they're pretty simple to take care of.
Yeah. Well, she's not, but she sleeps a lot.
No, dogs are definitely a step up from as far as the difficulty level.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one thing that was cool at Horizon Village, how they had the dogs come around.
Oh, yeah.
They had the therapy dogs.
Mm-hmm.
A good amount of them, actually.
Was that helpful for you guys?
I mean, for me, I didn't find, but I mean, I observed how it helped a lot of people. To me, the one dog was actually annoyed the shit out of me. And I did an episode with, it was the vice president of Horizon Village, her dog.
Oh, okay.
And we did a dog walk while I was there, and I ended up walking him. He's a golden retriever, and I did a podcast with her and found out that was their dog, and I was like, oh, I love that dog. That dog is so awesome.
I'm just kidding.
I don't like that dog. He drove me nuts. But yeah, but I see how much it really helped a lot of people, because they'd let you take them out on, you can go outside and walk them, and there's some people who were, I'm sure, had dogs growing up and just were obsessed and helped out, and so
it's just a different dynamic, I think, with dogs. They can't tell on you or make fun of you or anything.
They do. Even I remember thinking that after my addiction first came out, I was like, oh, my dog still is just excited to see me.
Not going anywhere.
But yes, thank you for taking your time coming on here.
Absolutely.
And I will be staying in touch with you.
Yeah.
And letting you know when this is coming out, probably Monday.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, Angela, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. As always, I love you. You're the best.
That's right.
Your support is incredible. It keeps me moving. It keeps me encouraged. It keeps the fuel in the fire burning. And I hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, I think I complain about this every episode. I guess I just need to stop, because one day I will have a beautifully quiet office and studio to record in. But I went in there with Angela thinking, all right, cool. She got an office. It'll be quiet. And of course, there's a street right out there. You hear cars whizzing by and everything else. But it is what it is. I guess the most important part is the information. I've had to really learn and work on not being a perfectionist when it comes to that. Because as of now, I don't have a place where I can go, and that's always quiet and is convenient and perfect for recording and doing podcasts. So that is all. Again, if you have a chance to come out on the 18th to Horizon Village in Sanborn, New York at 6 p.m., come out, check out one of my first big presentations that I'm doing, and I hope to see you guys there. Come up and talk to me afterwards. Let me know that you have listened and you do listen to the podcast. All right, guys. Much love. Peace out.
That's right. That's right. Oh, you better believe it.